Pick a morning, any day in the week. 2.5 million employees of the federal government are on their way to work in federal facilities throughout the country. This happens to be a Monday in mid-September at the headquarters of the Social Security Administration outside Baltimore, Maryland. These federal employees, 12,000 strong, operate one of the largest record-keeping installations in the world, where the Social Security account number, work history, and lifetime earnings of nearly everyone who works are recorded. 175 million accounts. This is the nerve center for paying cash benefits to America's growing family of 23 million Social Security beneficiaries, and for administrating the Medicare program, covering more than 19 million people. To protect its employees, as well as its functions in the event of a nuclear attack, the Social Security Administration has undertaken a comprehensive civil defense program. Located almost in the center of the county, with fallout shelter for 30,000 persons, the facility also plays an important role in the civil defense plan for this suburban community. Let's drop in on Mike Swatko, Civil Defense Coordinator for the Social Security Administration, who's talking to a group of employees who are being trained in fallout shelter management.
Disaster hospital, which is installed in this facility. It's used for the shelterees during the immediate post-attack period and can be used for the remainder of the community during the...
After an attack warning is sounded, upwards of 18,000 people from the surrounding area would be expected to enter this facility. The expeditious movement of so many people is an essential element of the civil defense plan for this building. Today, the Civil Defense Coordinator has scheduled a fire drill to test the warden system and the personnel movement plan.
In a four-story building in Area C, we're going to have traffic problems. The major problem I see is through the main lobby door. And of course, we have to avoid having people cross the access road where we're going to have the Baltimore County Fire Bureau come in with their fire equipment.
Well, having observed traffic during normal operations, the heaviest traffic will very definitely be through that particular exit.
Keep in mind that the organization we have for this fire evacuation is also the same organization we're going to use for any civil defense emergency, including a nuclear disaster. Civil defense preparedness is the standard procedure at the headquarters of the Social Security Administration. Our 30,000 shelter spaces make this one of the largest shelters in the country. Our 9 shelter areas cover about 12 acres of floor space, with a high degree of protection from fallout. Our 180 million records have been microfilmed and stored at a remote underground site. This precaution assures protection of Social Security claims and Medicare benefits of almost every American. It preserves our agency's memory. Our civil defense plan includes preparations for carrying on the agency's work after an attack on the United States. The radio in our control center ties us into the Baltimore County Civil Defense Network. We can also communicate by radio with other agencies of the federal government.
This is Officer Satterfield, Social Security Building, Woodlawn. This is a test fire drill.
To protect our workforce, we train employees in rescue, in firefighting, and building evacuation. Today's evacuation includes the use of Baltimore County Fire Bureau and all firefighting apparatus necessary to perform any rescue mission. The precision and skill demonstrated during this exercise is an important asset to any disaster plan. Cooperation between federal facilities such as the Social Security Administration and the county is a vital facet of our civil defense planning.
As the local fire department responds to the practice alarm, the mutual aid arrangements between this federal facility and the local government are demonstrated for all participants.
All clear, you can return back to your work position. All clear.
As the Social Security employees and the firefighters return to their jobs, another in a series of civil defense exercises is concluded, and the community stands more fully prepared to respond to an emergency with discipline and dispatch. 20 miles west of Washington, D.C., lies Dulles International Airport, a giant airport handling hundreds of flight operations a day. With passengers going to or coming from all parts of the world. To protect these travelers, as well as the 1,500 airport employees and tenants, the airport also has a civil defense plan, a disaster control plan for any emergency. Altogether, there are nearly 2,800 stocked shelter spaces, enough for all the employees, passengers, concessionaires, and visitors who may be on the airport in an emergency. Shelter areas in the terminal building were designed for dual use. On a day-to-day basis, they are used by the rental car agencies. There are 6 fallout shelter areas in the building. Shelter supplies, kept in a central storage area, would be distributed to the shelters by shelter management teams. Both Roy Parnell, operations officer, and Fire Chief Paul Benrick keep a close eye on airport emergency planning as well as routine operations.
The situation that you're speaking of could easily be handled by our foam trucks and pumpers and the 5-man crew standby.
Well, could your men respond to W-8 if this situation came up?
All of our men undergo continuing training for all types of emergencies. Once a month, we ignite contaminated jet fuel at one of our training grounds as a practical exercise for the foam truck teams and their equipment. Proper techniques in the application of suppressants ensure rapid control of any fire situation. If we are going to save lives and control damage at this airport, these men and equipment must continue to be a vital force in any disaster plan.
This is Dulles Tower with a standby on the field. Boeing 707 with warning light gear activated 5 miles north, landing on 19 right. Estimate touchdown in 3 minutes. Standby on the field.
Fire department reads you loud and clear. Sounds like a military aircraft to me. Let's roll.
Movements on the airport are coordinated by the Dulles Control Tower, a key element in the airport's disaster control plan. Today, it alerts the crash and rescue team to an aircraft malfunction. In case of attack, it would transmit warning information, mobilize airport personnel for emergency operations, and direct movement to shelter.
All the men that you see mobilized here this morning also have received intensive training for civil defense.
Well, with the shelter spaces provided us in that disaster plan, we can handle the entire population of the airport, your men and the crew of the aircraft.
Such an emergency as this is only a small part of our total responsibility.
Well, it looks like your men got it under control, Chief. Let's get going.
There are more than 50 firemen at Dulles International Airport, and all of them have received special training in radiological monitoring. As aircraft from all over the world arrive and take off from this airport, passengers, crews, and visitors come and go, unaware of the airport's disaster control plan, a plan that would save lives and control damage in an emergency. In our nation's capital is the Pentagon, headquarters for America's military forces, nerve center for our defense against enemy aggression, and one of the largest office buildings in the world. With a workday population of 27,000 military and civilian employees, the Pentagon is virtually a city within a city. Like other federal facilities, the Pentagon has its own disaster control organization. Colonel Bannon is the man responsible for civil defense preparations in this building, in which the Secretary of Defense has his headquarters, along with the Secretaries of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Every Monday, the Pentagon warning system is tested. 4,200 clocks sound the alarm in thousands of offices along the 17.5 miles of corridors within the building. This battery-operated vehicle is an integral part of the Pentagon's disaster control program. In a civil defense emergency, it would be able to provide professional fire protection services in any part of the building. This storage facility is one of the many areas in and around the Pentagon in which fallout shelter supplies and equipment are stored for some 40,000 persons for whom the facility is stocked. Meanwhile, the Pentagon goes about its daily business of guarding America and the free world from aggression. All over the country, federal facilities, large and small, are participating in community civil defense programs. The Federal Building and U.S. Courthouse in downtown Memphis has more fallout shelter space than any other building in the city. Here, there are about 60 district and regional offices of federal government agencies, including the Department of Agriculture, the Internal Revenue Service, law enforcement agencies, and the federal judiciary.
Your Honor, please, in the case of United States of America versus 925 acres of land, the Mud Island case. I understand that motion is set a week.
Shelter space in this building is adequate for all of the people who work here and about 16,000 more. The central core of the building provides readily available fallout shelter on various floors, as well as in the basement. Shelter supplies for some 17,000 people are stored in the building. An artesian well ensures an adequate emergency water supply. On this day in September, the principal officers of the building's self-protection organization are meeting with a representative of the Shelby County Civil Defense Commission. When a building is occupied by more than one federal agency, civil defense planning for the building is a joint responsibility of all the tenants. Procedures for this are laid down by the government's chief landlord, the General Services Administration, in a handbook called Civil Defense and Disaster Control in Federal Buildings.
Located in this building. A prime example of space utilization in your building is your federal firing range, located in the basement. Today, it is used by your federal law enforcement agencies. Tomorrow, it may be converted into an emergency operating center in case of a nuclear disaster. I cannot overemphasize the importance of civil defense coordination at all levels of government.
At Waterloo, Iowa, in the heart of the Corn Belt, the time is just past noon. Time for the pickup of mail in the suburbs. Time also for collecting and sorting the local mail. For the postal employees, the other building occupants, and the neighboring public, this post office has 250 stocked shelter spaces ready for use in a civil defense emergency. The disaster control plan for this post office includes detailed operating instructions for the protection of building occupants, the mail, and government property. Like other federal facilities, the Waterloo Post Office works closely with the local civil defense director and other departments of the local government. In fact, on this day in September, Mayor Lloyd Turner and Civil Defense Director Al Maracle are discussing emergency preparations with Postmaster Wayne Smith in his office.
Taking a look at your plan lately to see if it's up to date. Yes, Lloyd, we have recently updated our plan. We feel it's very comprehensive to take care of our personnel, our supplies, and our mail and so forth.
Well, Wayne, several months ago we installed the supplies in the basement for 250 shelterees. Has the placement of these supplies given you any problem?
It hasn't given us any problem, Al. We have supplies down there to capacity of 250 persons for approximately 14 days. Well, this is our main shelter area and some of our...
To ensure effective use of emergency supplies and equipment on hand in the shelter, Post Office employees have been trained in shelter management and other civil defense skills. In a civil defense emergency, this post office, like others throughout the country, would provide registration services for reuniting families that might have been separated. Postmaster Wayne Smith expects employees to cooperate intelligently with the building's self-protection activities and the community's civil defense program. He knows this requires training. The Civil Defense Director at Waterloo has arranged to make such training available to employees designated by the postmaster. A class in radiological monitoring is underway now.
We will use this Geiger counter to actually measure the amount of radiation being...
The standard supplies for every public fallout shelter include a kit of radiological monitoring instruments. After fallout arrives, intelligent decisions about where it is safe to go, what can be done, and how much time can be spent doing it can be made only if the radiation hazard is detected and measured. This is done with radiological monitoring instruments. As in other federal facilities, emergency plans at the Waterloo Post Office have been developed as an integral part of its continuing operations. In Houston, Texas, the time is now 2:30 p.m. Let's look in on Dr. John V. Claiborne, director of this huge hospital, who personally supervises the civil defense preparations here.
Since Houston is so close to the Gulf of Mexico, we can expect hurricanes and similar disasters. For this reason, I've learned the value of preparation and preparedness. That's why in this hospital, we must continue to make specific preparations for the protection of our patients, our staff, the public, in a civil defense emergency.
It's time now for surgery at this Veterans Administration Hospital. One of many VA hospitals providing medical care and treatment for America's 22 million veterans.
Scissors, please. Clamp. Suture, please. Scissors, please. Sponge.
It is no accident that this building provides excellent fallout protection. The hospital was specially designed to provide more than 12,000 shelter spaces. We have dual-use fallout shelter space on the intermediate floors of our tallest buildings, in basements, and in the 2 miles of underground passageways that connect our outlying buildings. We have our own well, which gives us a dependable supply of water for use in emergency. And we have a 30 to 50 day supply of drugs and medicines. In an emergency, battery-operated vehicles can quickly move civil defense supplies from various storage areas to the shelter areas. The hospital civil defense plan calls for an emergency operating room in the basement, where we have a standby generator to assure an uninterrupted power supply. Our closed-circuit communications network can be converted into a center for transmission of vital information. In addition to our 1,400 patients, our 1,700 member staff, and our 1,000 so visitors each day, we can shelter about 8,000 people from the surrounding area in the event of a nuclear attack on the United States. Like all other VA hospitals, we have spelled out our emergency procedures in a disaster control plan. We believe our plan and our preparations will assure that the Houston
VA hospital can continue to function in any emergency.
West of the Continental Divide, nestled deep in the heart of the Rockies, it is mid-afternoon in Kalispell, Montana, county seat of vast cattle-growing Flathead County, a rugged area of the far west where distances for its approximately 13,000 inhabitants mean very little. This is Colonel Ralph Slater, Civil Defense Director of Kalispell and Flathead County, on his way to make one of his many visits to bolster the civil defense preparedness of the county. Under Colonel Slater's direction, 1 out of every 10 inhabitants of Flathead County, 1,260 people, have been trained in medical self-help. He has trained 38 residents of the county in radiological monitoring. 19 of them are now instructors, and he has 6 instructors in shelter management. The Colonel recruits his instructors from far and wide, including the Hungry Horse Project of the Bureau of Reclamation of the U.S. Department of Interior, site of a hydroelectric plant that provides power for western Montana, in a scenic wonderland visited each day by scores of vacationers. At Hungry Horse, civil defense planning involves the dam's 53 employees, their families, the rangers from the nearby National Forest, and visitors in the area. The dam has sufficient fallout shelter supplies on hand to sustain 500 people for 2 weeks. Today, Colonel Slater has come to make his annual inspection of the fallout shelter supplies with the project director.
Civil defense pamphlets that I'm sure you'll find interesting. I would like to have them passed on to your employees.
I'll be happy to get them to the employees, and I'll see that they're distributed.
I know you have a busy day. Could we get started on the inspection?
At Hungry Horse Dam, as in federal facilities elsewhere, information about personal and family survival is made available to employees and their families.
Well, let's move on then.
Most of the shelter areas are deep under thousands upon thousands of tons of concrete. These tunnels and passageways, honeycombing the entire project at Hungry Horse, stand as a virtual fortress of civil defense preparedness. 3,000 miles to the east is Plattsburgh Air Force Base, where on this day in September, the Strategic Air Command is conducting an all-day exercise.
Status of airfield damage at the present.
There is a scattered letter throughout. We have our people working on this problem now, and there's no...
The exercise activities are directed and controlled from the war room.
There are many fires throughout the base. The fire department is responding right now.
Sir, we have an inbound emergency on an F-106.
What's the nature of the emergency?
The F-106 is over the base and it's planed out.
Roger, let's land him on the main runway and get him into shelter as soon as possible. About the status of your maintenance personnel. Sir, latest report shows the average accumulation of the maintenance personnel on the flat line about 75 rangers. Vice Commander, any comment?
Only that with the increased Lincoln count, we'll have to watch sulfur control very carefully.
Roger. Phone 0 Rankin.
Sergeant, what's the latest information on your Rankin count?
Mobile Rad 1, 50 Rankins at the parking row 3 Fox.
Emergency operating procedures are simulated by radiological monitoring teams on the flight line. Their findings are quickly relayed to the command post.
Okay, that's 50
Fallout patterns are
Rankins
plotted.
at parking row 3 Fox. You want to mark that on the chart? Okay, that's 50 Rankins. Right, 50.
When the attack warning signal was sounded, military families living on the base went immediately to their assigned fallout shelters in brick buildings on the old base. The Civil Defense Director from the city of Plattsburgh is observing the exercise with a military specialist in emergency planning, who explains that the Secretary of Defense has directed all defense installations and facilities to develop civil defense plans for both military and civilian personnel.
This is a civil-type shelter on the base with a protection factor between 20 and 40.
Tell me one other thing, Major. How do these people know that they are to come to this particular shelter?
Well, upon sounding of a NORAD yellow condition alert, all dependents and non-essential personnel on the base will report to their designated shelters.
I see. This is very similar to the plan that we have in the city of Plattsburgh.
Yes, sir, it is.
At casualty collection stations, simulated injuries are treated, and an emergency field hospital is set up. Critical cases are taken to the base hospital, as stipulated in the disaster control plan. As the exercise concludes, flight line activity returns to normal, and mothers and children head for home. This exercise, directed by the base commander, has vigorously tested the civil defense preparedness on the base, including plans and preparations for personal and family survival. Meanwhile, back at the Social Security Administration, the workday is over. On this day in September, as on any workday the year around, civil defense preparations went forward in federal facilities, a part of the regular work of government employees everywhere. Like other employers, the federal agencies see that preparations are made to save lives and protect property at the workplace in case of an attack. They do this in cooperation with the local governments in the areas where their facilities are located.